as well, is just as some basis or guidance and sense, if you will, of what the future enrollment will be looking like in Wilton, Connecticut. What we use in this report is something called the cohort retention method, which is quite simply put a history of the enrollment in order to come up with averages of migration with class to class. And we'll be going through all of that. I've broken down the report presentation into three pieces. The first and the most important one is the guts of moving everybody from grade to grade and coming up with average migration figures as children move through the school system. The second piece, and this one we'll spend a little time with because it's a little more challenging, is the pre-K, and coming up with census figures for that and trying to pin down those little pre-K children who are all over Connecticut. So we'll be doing that, and then we'll revisit the combination of all of the pre-K and the children currently enrolled in the schools to come up with what it looks like the Wilton will be looking like on 10/1/2020. So Amber, start with. That's right, there we go. Okay, so in order to do this, the very first thing we have to do is go to the children that are in school already, and we take history. So we go back to the history from 2014 through 2019, and this is just simply the children that were in school. What happens is, and how we derive our migration figures, is we go to the very top kindergarten here in 2014 of 262 students. What we say is, well, we expected that in 2015 we would have had 262 students, but we don't. We have 286 students, so we have a net migration figure of 24. And then we put that on the line going diagonally, so that we can see we went from 262 to 286. We do that across the entire line. We do the same for first grade. Moving to second grade, we see we had a -3 going from first grade to second grade in 2014 to 2015. And as we just go through each year, 2014, we move all the students forward. We assume they're all moving forward. We do it for 2015, the same thing, 2016, 2017, and 18, till we come up with 5 migrations. And if you'll see, that's by class. So we have the kindergarten migrations here, first grade migrations are there. Sorry, my hand seems so shaky, I don't know why. And then we have the second grade migrations right here. And again, it goes all the way across so that we have them for all grades K through 11. What happens now is we take these migrations, and you'll see an average down here of what we're going to be using when we go to come up with the 2020 enrollment that we are projecting for 10/1/2020. Down here, I know it's teeny tiny, but down here is where we take the averages of these migrations. And why we do that is we don't want any particular year to have more weight than another year. So what we do is we take a 5-year average, a 4-year average of the most recent 4 years, and then a 3-year average of the most recent 3 years in order to come up with what the average migration is of a student moving from, for example, kindergarten to first grade. Our average migration figure is 16. So what going from kindergarten to first grade, we say, well, going from kindergarten to first grade, we average an additional 16 students. In 2019, we had 210 kindergartners. And we expect that we're going to have an increase, if you will, of students, of 16 students going from kindergarten to first grade, so that we anticipate in October of 2020 that we're going to have 226 first graders. We do the same then for the kindergarten going from first grade, we do the same for going from first grade to second grade, except our average down here is 9 students. It's important to note that we have to round the numbers because students don't come in fractions. At least as far as I know, they don't. And so we have to make sure that we have rounded numbers and that they all come to even numbers when we are doing this. Otherwise, we can get into trouble when we go across trying to add these figures up. So this is really the guts of it when you're just moving students from grade to grade. It's very straightforward. Are there any questions about this particular piece? It's really just a matter of algebra, yes.
Do you ever use percentages
For,
for the migration? You know, like say it's 5% a year.
no, I
Okay,
don't use that.
It's better to use numbers.
It's better
Okay.
to use numbers. And the reason why is because the numbers tend not to distort
Okay.
the way a percentage would when we
Okay.
have the migration from grade to grade.
Thank you.
Ellen, I had a couple questions.
Sure.
How did you ever get not a whole number in the raw data?
Well, for example, if you're adding 20, here, I'll show you. If you're adding up 24, 20, 14, 20, and 11, and you're coming up with an average of 5 years,
Got
I
it.
think it comes to like 17.52.
Okay, so it's when the averages.
It's when you're average, right.
And then the far right column, the net migration, I'm guessing that is, and the K through 12 total. Can you explain how you
Yes.
come to those?
Absolutely. That net there that you see where it says minus 77 is actually the net migration as students go from grade to grade, all right? Minus 12th grade, because we're assuming they've all graduated and they're all gone, and then the kindergarten the following year. So that's how we come up with that.
Wait, so the 12, it's not 12, the number 12 is just the graduates and then the new kindergarten.
No, the
No.
number 12 is if you add everything across here, that's the net migration.
Oh, okay.
Just see, we tend to add kids.
Yeah.
in the year.
Right.
So there's
And then we
kids
take
at
the
high
the
school.
seniors out and
Yes.
then add the new kindergarten,
Okay, got it.
okay?
So for example, in 2017, we had a total negative
Yes.
20.
Correct. That's
So we had
correct.
more kids leave than coming in.
That's correct.
But every year other than that, we've had more kids coming in than leaving.
We've had more kids migrating into the school system, and there are reasons for that. Some people put their kids in private school and then, decide they're not going to do that, and they put them back in. There's economic reasons. There's a host of reasons, people moving in and out of the community, so.
And how long have you been keeping this data? Since 2014? Do you have
I have data probably going back to, oh my gosh,
10 years?
I have to say 19-something, so.
And I don't know if you're going to get into this later, but have we ever looked like your assumption in 2018 versus the reality of 2018?
Yes, we do go back and look. I did particularly this year with the kindergarten figures because I did a census and was trying to get a handle on how many preschoolers there are out there, and by calling some of the preschools, not just in Wilton, but some of the surrounding communities as well. And then the big piece we're missing, but I don't think it's a huge number, are children that don't go to preschool.
Yeah.
There's a number of children that don't go to preschool either, and trying to pin that number is a little more challenging. So when I did this, I looked to see a few years ago what I had projected as being the kindergarten, and it's within my comfort zone. So I thought, all right,
And what's your comfort zone?
usually,
10%?
actually I do it in terms of students. I was within 7 students, so I thought, okay, I
Okay.
can do that. I can live with that.
Yeah, you may get to this, the big jump between 2019 kindergarten and 2020, we're up 21 students.
Yes.
What, will you address that? I mean, what's?
Yeah, we'll address that. That really had to do more with birth rate
Birth rate, okay.
than anything else. So, yeah, the birth rate was significantly lower that year than the year that I'm projecting.
Okay.
So,
Good, okay.
anybody else have any questions?
You'll never get through it if you keep.
Oh, all right, sorry. All right, let's skip to kindergarten and the pre-K, because this really is, as I had indicated a couple times, a little bit more challenging, because there's just no one place to go for that data. There's no, historical data being kept. We really had to, Amber and my other assistant called preschools around town and tried to get just Wilton students by age, by year, in order to come up with a census. And I think we did a pretty good job doing this. And of course, we didn't just use Wilton preschools, because there's a number of parents who do use preschools where they work in Stamford and Norwalk, and we thought that it was important to include those schools as well. Again, you're missing, the population you're missing are those who don't go to preschool or are in private homes, being either homeschooled or have some kind of daycare within a private home. We're missing that group. But I feel confident in looking at what I had done the previous years and looking at the numbers that we had gotten from our census, that our projected kindergarten will probably be close to 231 students. And as you see here, Glenn, we had the 214 birth rate was 115. Ours is 132. So the other thing is that you'll find as well with these birth rates, not everybody registers the birth in the town. There are children born in Stamford and Norwalk, and they don't necessarily register the birth in the town. So, we use the best data. That's why using this particular method is the best, because it does use historic data you have. So if it's consistent, it will bring in the trend over time and will give you a number that's consistent with what you've been experiencing. So similar to the other classes, we use averages of history now to come up with what we think the increase will be when a child goes from where they are, the census in 2019, to when they start kindergarten. And how do we do that? Well, we take history, once again. We take these birth years from 2010 to 2014, and we see that when you have, and you'll have to go down here, I'm sorry, it's kind of broken up a bit, but this is averages of history. When you have a student 1 year out in 2015 entering year, we assume that the students are all entering when they're 5 years old. And that, too, is another piece of the challenge, is that not all students start school when they're 5. In fact, there were quite a few children that were held back, 5-year-olds, that we noticed when we did our census. So that's something else to think about as well. We can't ignore that because they're just starting a little bit later. Anyway, what we have here is we see that entering kindergarten 2015, that was birth year 2010, we had an increment of 35 students enter when they went from the 2014 census year to when they actually entered in 2015. Likewise, with the 2016 entering year, we had a 29 increase in students from the census year to when they entered kindergarten. Again, we do the same thing for all of the students first year out. Then we do it for the second year out. So for example, we go once again to birth year 2010. We say, well, when the student census was in 2013, we had 175 students, but 236 showed up at kindergarten. That was an increase of 61 students. And we do that for 2 years out, 3 years out, and 4 years out. And then we come up with what the average was for when a student was included in the census and who actually showed up, the number that showed up in kindergarten when it was time for them to enter. Does everyone understand that?
Well,
Okay.
clearly, I think the increases that we're seeing are the result of what we did at Driscoll. Yeah, and building basically a brand-new school. And I think it has, attracted a significant number of people that maybe we would not have considered it before.
Right.
So to the extent that we're attracting people into our system, it's a very good thing.
Well, it certainly was showing in
Yeah.
this 231
Yeah.
number that
There's
I,
no other reason for it,
Yeah.
other than that, we want to. And so I think it's really a result that we had hoped for as we did the remodeling and invested the money in it. And it's showing here that we're getting a return on that. So
Right.
it's great.
so that's the census, and now we have to go back to, no, the other one, Amber. Page 2. There we go, perfect. Okay. Now we go back, and I have a kindergarten figure, which I put in under 2020 right here, of 231 students. And then we now have our full enrollment for 2020, which is going to be 3,000, oops, I need my glasses, it's terrible. 3,760 students, K through 12. And then, of course, for reference for future years, we use these averages of migration to come up with, we take the kindergarten in 2020 and we add 16 students, and we'll have 247 in 2021 in first grade. So this is just, these numbers down here are the ones that I had used to see if I was within striking distance, and I felt comfortable. So that's what it looks like from 4K to 12. And now Amber, let's look at grade group so we can see what each school is going to look like. Okay, can we get that a little bigger? Thank you. I couldn't read it. Okay, so if we look at enrollment projection by grade group, in 2020, we anticipate that the K-2 will be 717 students. Grades 3 to 5 are going to be 801. Grades 6 to 8 will be 935. Grades 9 through 12 will be 1307. That brings us to our total of 3760. Now, I kept preschool at 70. Because for two reasons. That was the enrollment that we had, and I wanted to make sure that we were consistent with what the peer models were versus the children that are receiving services. And then, and that number seems to be a solid number. And then what we do, out of district traditionally has been, we kept it at 20. Those are students that, not vocational schools, but other reasons that they are out of district and being taught. So that if we add the preschool as well as out of district, we come up with 3,850 students in the school system in 2020. Okay.
So your preschool numbers, just for clarification, include students receiving services and typical peers?
Correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
And, I'm sorry, and not itinerant students, right? These are just students in the classrooms?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what are some of the things that could impact this projection? Well, one of the beauties of this model is that if there is an outlier, it gets smoothed by all the averages that we use. So that 1 year in particular is not going to totally affect the rest of the projection and throw everything way off. Because of the way we do the averages, it will smooth out any anomalies. But by the same token, if there is a new trend, it will be brought into the projection as well. That takes a little longer. It takes an average of 3 to 4 years before the full trend is incorporated into the projection, so that you can then indeed say, yes, this is a new trend. We're noticing housing has all of a sudden gone through the roof, and everybody's selling their house, and all these young students are moving in. But the model is going to correct itself for that. And that's why it's important that we use this particular model of historical data. All right, what else can I tell you? Sure.
In 2010 versus projection for 2020, in K through 2, we will be down 209 students from 2010 to 2020. But if I look over the high school, we're going to be up students. I don't, that doesn't, what happened to all of those, I don't know, it's just, where are they going to come from to get us up?
Well, you have smaller classes coming into kindergarten.
Correct.
And larger classes moving through the system, and so, right? It's just
Right,
taking
that adds
that
students
number of
throughout the
years.
year.
Wow.
So really, the big change, Glenn, that happens is that we're graduating bigger classes because of the increase from net migrations, but the kindergartens coming in are a bit lower.
Okay. So they're coming into the system later and
Correct.
grades, okay?
Correct.
Okay, it just stands out when you look at it, it's like, whoa. Okay,
Yeah, I think that the in-migration pattern is really fascinating because we add students really reliably right through eighth
Yeah.
grade, and then you see for some of the reasons
Yeah.
Ellen mentioned earlier.
all right, well, we saw that with like third grade a couple of years,
Yeah.
a couple
Right.
years ago, we
Right.
saw a big, okay.
Right.
All right, okay.
True. Well, I don't have anything to add. Does anyone have any questions, any clarification that they might want? I'm in town, so if you look at this report, you're reading it and think, wow, this is so exciting, I have to sit with Ellen and go over some things, I'm happy to do it.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
So I noticed you did 2010 through 2019. Is that 10 year, that 9-10 years kind of like a typical bell curve cycle? Is that kind of how it,
That's absolutely correct. That's
so every
what-
10 years you kind of see the general trend starting over again
Yes.
to some extent?
Yes. All right.
Your projections have always
Sure.
been right on, so thank you.
I hope this one is too.
Ellen,
I'm
quick
always
question.
nervous October 1st. I'm always like, oh no.
Okay.
Going back to this page, so
Sure.
the class of 2014, let's just say, the first upper left.
Yes.
In kindergarten, there were 262 kids in that class. And now that same class today has 314. Is that, am I reading that correct, if you go diagonal?
If you,
That's right.
yes, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, so you can see, right, if you pick any of those classes and run
Right, you just run
diagonally down the line,
Right, you can
every
see
year you can see
what's
how they add.
anticipated, right, what's happened.
Yeah,
And that's all pure net migration.
yeah,
It's interesting.
great,
Great.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, my pleasure.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
This is crucial to the budget, so thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, sticking with numbers, we have the class size report.
Great, so a couple of things. You have the class size report. For your convenience, Lucy, I'll put it in a binder. We publish this annually, and this is an important document. It gives us a 10,000-foot view of all of our staff and where they are, as well as all of our classroom teachers and how many students are in those classes. And you can see the distributions across grade levels, across subject areas. I would say, on the whole, we are operating inside our class guidelines, in a couple of cases a little underneath our class guidelines. So kindergarten is around 18, first, second, third, fourth grade around 20, about 22 in grade 5, and then sixth grade on average is a bit lower. It's a smaller cohort, so those class sizes run anywhere from 18 to 22, and then they increase as you move up through the grades to 22, 23. Once you get into the high school, you see quite a bit of variance, and that's really a function of scheduling and the courses that are available. There are a couple of things that I would just highlight for you. This past year, the high school applied some additional FTE to our Algebra 1 classes. You know, we've been attacking our issues in mathematics in a number of ways. So when you look at class sizes in mathematics, you'll note that the Algebra 1 class size is substantially smaller. That's intentional. And then other than that, I would just say as a resource guide, the administration refers to this. We use it through the budgeting process as we're looking at incoming cohorts. We use the information to make staffing decisions, and to conduct additional analyses as necessary.
Thank you. And I appreciate that there's some history here too, so
Yes.
you can see trends and changes. Discussion, questions? Right.
I think at some point, we had talked about this before, that if you look at this, I mean, the variances in the high school are really pretty dramatic.
I'm sorry,
The variances
Yes.
in class size in the high school are pretty dramatic, and I don't know what, if anything, because of the way schedule works and offerings, et cetera, that can be done to smooth that out a little bit. But because if you look at Middlebrook, you look at the other schools, they're pretty consistent, class, subject to subject, class to class. But the high school really stands out. You get 11 students in a class versus, whatever, and it's just,
Right.
it's the offerings.
I think, a couple of things. The numbers on paper can be deceiving, so I would encourage you, if you see something that you question, flag it.
Yeah.
For example, when I think first and most importantly, the high school works really hard to accommodate student selections, and so that's in part why you see the variance.
Yeah.
And the high school staffs to the section, so when you get a budget report, and for the new board members, you'll see this for the first time, but annually, we will have increases and decreases across departments because the high school staffs to student demand. And so if there is excess demand in social studies, you'll see an increase in social studies. If there is limited demand in another department, you'll see a reduction in staffing in the department. It's usually an increase of a decrease of, can be a half an FTE, give or take. So those fluctuations are normal. The high school also, when they, because they try to accommodate students, so in classes, and Bob help me out here, I'm gonna say, studio art 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, you might get just a couple of kids in each of those classes, so the high school will double up the sections and run them concurrently with a single teacher as a way to try to accommodate the offering.
That's very accurate, yeah. And Mr. Hemmerly, if you're referring to variances between departments, this may help. For example, we purposely section English quite a bit lower intentionally right from the start, and then science, for example, to remain within safety standards.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
You'll see English and science classes averaging somewhere, in the 22 range, whereas world language, upper level mathematics, social studies, those are areas where we're sectioning perhaps as high as 27. So you see those variances. And then if you look at some of the elective courses, there are facility constraints as well that, play a role in that. For example, a ceramics lab that accommodates 18 students, or a computer graphics lab that accommodates 20 students. So there are so many variables involved in some of the numbers, but I think the team does do a good job balancing the sections across specific courses, and that's always one of our goals. And there are variables even within every single department, so there's quite a bit to it. It's relatively complex.
Yeah, it is. Granted, I understand that, and student demand, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot to it.
Kevin, when you're just looking at the general, looking at the second page, Miller Driscoll classroom, so these are actually students sitting in the classroom?
That's correct.
And then the IEP, those are students of that year who have an IEP, or these additional students?
No, so that's broken out, so of that.
So the
total
720?
population- Correct, so. it's
67 of those?
You got it.
Got it. And then the 504 is
Same.
12 of the 67 of the
No, 12 of the 720.
720? Okay. And then what is the itinerant?
So itinerant students in pre-K, those are students that come for speech services.
Got
They
it.
might come an hour a day, 3 days a week.
And my last question is, some of this staff has FTE grants behind them? So is that out of a different budget?
Yeah, so anything that's funded through a grant, in addition to the town-approved operating budget, those are really taxpayer funds. We also receive some limited grants, primarily in IDEA, which is special education.
Got it.
We receive a small amount of grant funding from the federal government for Title II, and we try to supplement some of those staff positions
From those grants?
from the grants,
Got it.
correct. And so you'll have a note here, and you'll see, because we do total staffing here.
Yep.
And there's a difference between total staffing and the staffing that we accommodate in
In the
the
budget.
operating budget.
Got it.
And right now, just for your information, if you separate out any staff that's covered by the grant, we are 2 staff members over what we budgeted, and those are 2 additional staff that we hired at the start of the school year in special education to accommodate a student that returned to the district.
Got it.
So we do have a variance of +2 with staff right now.
Where are you reading that from, or is it just?
I don't know if it was
Okay, no, I just didn't know if I
noted
was,
here.
that's fine, that's fine.
Yeah, in fact, it's probably not noted here.
Okay, good to know.
Any other questions, discussion? All right, thank you, and this is a document that gets used a lot, so thank you.
Yeah, I
For
would
all
just.
those who for all those who put the work into compiling it,
This is great.
thank
Sure.
you.
When you come for the budget workshops in
Yes.
January,
Bring
you
it.
might bring this
Bring it.
because you'll hear the various administrators referring to programs and classrooms, and it's a handy reference guide just to help you keep track of where we're applying dollars.
Okay. Thank you, and to the staff that put that together. Next, we have some courses to talk about and programs, starting with K-8 Social Studies.
Hi. Those of you who don't know, I'm Karen. I'm the K-8 Humanities Coordinator. So by way of background, in 2015, the Connecticut State Department of Education released the social studies frameworks that outline for each grade level, kindergarten through high school, 3 things: the standards that students are going to learn, the content that's to be studied, and the discipline of focus for each grade level. That work was guided and informed by the work of the Council of Chief State School Officers and the National Council of Social Studies, who had previously designed the C3 framework. The C3 framework and the Connecticut Social Studies framework, by extension, united the 2010 call by the Common Core that students be college and career ready with a third aim, which is that they're also prepared to be civically responsible. By preparing students for civic life, we want them to be aware of their changing cultural and physical environments. We want them to know the past and its impact on the present and the future. We want them to read and write and think deeply and to act in ways that promote the common good. The C3 framework, and subsequently the Connecticut Social Studies framework, signals a significant departure from past practice, seeking to take advantage of a growing body of research about how students learn. They put 3 conditions for learning. They push those to the forefront. One is that students have the opportunity to ask questions, that they have opportunities to answer those questions under the tutelage of expert teachers who can guide them in disciplined thinking, and that they're provided opportunities to communicate and act on their understandings. This type of student-centered instruction results in 4 significant shifts in practices in the social studies classroom. The most evident of those 4 shifts is the shift to to 4 separate dimensions in the inquiry framework as the primary driver for instruction. That engages students in questions, and in the first dimension, it positions questions as a problem-solving space. In the second dimension, it uses investigative practices fueled by disciplinary thinking. In the third dimension, the students collaboratively engage in problem-solving strategies. And in the fourth dimension, they take informed action with all of that study that they did. The second significant shift that the frameworks require of our instruction is that content and skills are integrated into this inquiry in purposeful, authentic, and relevant ways. This requires some disciplinary thinking and disciplinary literacies, so reading and writing and thinking like a historian. Historical thinking involves asking what the past means, what people in the past were thinking and talking about, and how that thinking and language impacted how they behaved in the ways that they did. We want students to read, write, and think like geographers. Geographic thinking focuses attention on place and space and seeks to understand how humans have dealt with that place and space in the ways that they do and with what consequences. We want students to read, think, and write like economists. Economic thinking involves a comparison of the marginal costs and the marginal benefits to allocate resources in a manner that maximizes well-being. And we want students to read, write, and think through a civic-minded lens so that they're prepared to participate in a democratic society. Civic-minded thinking examines questions about how power flows. And the final shift that the frameworks require is an emphasis on deep knowledge and understanding. It's no longer enough to memorize someone else's ideas and put them into your own, integrate them into your own thinking. In a rapidly changing world where ideas, information, and opinions are a mouse click away, students more than ever need to know how to keep learning in order to cultivate sound understandings. As a result, they'll need a deep well of powerful and disciplined strategies for answering their questions and for gathering data that can be evaluated and transformed into evidence for justifiable decisions. In this model, teachers act as guides, facilitators, and disciplinary ambassadors, while students are engaged in the investigative work. Working together, students learn how to think more clearly and powerfully by employing disciplinary knowledge and methods. If you look on the third page of your 6141 document, there's a scope and sequence there, and there are a couple things that I want to draw your attention to. In the left-hand column are the grade levels, kindergarten through 8th grade. If you look at kindergarten through 4th grade, you can see underneath the grade level the disciplinary focus that the frameworks articulate for each grade level. And in K through 4, we get a very broad examination of all 4 disciplines: economics, geography, history, and civics. In grade 5, though, a shift happens that persists throughout the upper grades, and that is a more targeted focus in a discipline. So in 5th grade, just as a student is becoming more cognitively capable of critical thinking, we see a focus on the historical discipline, and they're critically thinking in ways about U.S. history in 5th grade, where they're considering the perspectives of many groups, where they're looking at factors that influence individuals and groups' choices, and they're looking at the beginnings of a national identity. So they're moving to more abstract thinking and more critical thinking. 6th and 7th grade is a 2-year course in the study of world regional studies. They use the lens of geography to examine past and present features of people and nations in different regions of the world. And then in 8th grade, we come back to history, specifically U.S. history again. It's not a rehashing of the same learning that they did in 5th grade, but rather a deeper dive, because they're now even more cognitively able to look at nuances. And if you look in the right-hand column, you can see some of those compelling questions that will drive the inquiry throughout the year. For example, were the colonists justified in breaking away from Great Britain and forming a new government? You can see the nuance change there that requires more judgment and higher level thinking skills. And is the United States a just society, and how the concept of justice how has the concept of justice evolved over time? So just as children's cognitive development, this type of inquiry requires keeping pace with children's cognitive development. They're going to revisit U.S. history again in 11th or 12th grade later on in the high school, and we know the significant intellectual development that an 8th grader to that age, school ager, experiences. And we need them to be ready to both challenge their thinking and shape their capacity to move forward in more of a questioning stance as a member of a democratic society. So in 2015-16, the social studies curriculum was under review, and a team of stakeholders developed a program philosophy that outlined the program's focus as promoting civic mindedness, problem solving, and a deeper understanding of the past and how it impacts the present. In 2016-17, we began to align the Connecticut framework standards to our curriculum, and that began in the summer and extended into the school year. The frameworks outline the C3 discipline of focus for the content study for each grade level, which you can see in that table. Last year, we began piloting the units, completing kindergarten and grade 5 units, and last year was the first year that we had a social studies curriculum that was fully aligned to these frameworks. The units are built on a foundation of primary and scholarly sources and an application of digital learning and technology thoughtfully and in authentic contexts. Questions?
No, I'm happy with this. The question is, what do we do in the high school now? Because there was a meaningful change just a couple of years ago in the curriculum at the
Yes,
high.
we presented 6141s for all of the courses that were changed. So
Yeah.
currently, 9th grade is world history.
Yeah,
10th grade is a combination of an extension of world history and government.
yeah.
And this year, I believe it's this year, we started the American history in 11th grade, correct?
Yeah.
And then 12th grade will be primarily electives.
Okay. All right, okay. No, I'm good. It's pretty extensive work. Some major changes.
It's a big lift, and you'll see
Big
on
lift.
the budgetary
Yeah.
table that was taken into consideration
this
for
is,
professional learning.
A lot of work.
To remind the board,
Yeah.
traditionally, we had used policy 6141 almost exclusively to present new high school courses, and as we were working with the former Teaching and Learning Committee, through lots of conversation, it became clear that although we were changing curriculum in the lower grades, there wasn't an efficient vehicle to bring it in front of the board for review. And so we amended policy 6141 and broadened it. And so really this, I think, is the first example of a non-high school
Program, yeah.
program coming forward. And the board, over time, will see much more of that.
It's a much better management tool for me as well, because as changes are requested, I can say, well, you need to amend the 6141,
Here's
you
what
need to bring it before
Sure.
the board.
Sure.
So,
Just, so you said you had piloted already and things are going into effect. Have you found that the students are taking to the transition well? Or is there like between, students that are first being exposed to this in kindergarten and first grade who have no really other framework versus
Yeah.
some of the higher levels?
I think in our first pass last year, we saw a lot of teacher-directed inquiry, less student-led inquiry, but we're developing and refining those practices all the time. I'd love for you to come see a classroom in action. Just shoot me an email and I'll arrange that.
Yeah.
I think my question was the placement of U.S. history and why it's 5th grade and 8th grade,
Yeah.
broken up by 2 years of geography. There must be a logic. Is there a logic?
It is that cognitive development and what they're ready for, because they're questioning, and first they're learning the content and the basis, then they're looking at different perspectives, then they're starting to question and just take a deeper dive into that. And by the high school time, they're really looking into kind of some of the unjust practices within our government as a result of some of these histories.
Okay, so 8th grade is more of the questioning. They're better able.
Yeah,
Is that
and you can
it?
see that in the right column of that sequence, how that grows. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I just don't think that way, but I just more.
It's
linear.
very different than how I learned as well, and than how I taught it the first pass.
I have a very minor question, but I'm just wondering with the 8th grade, do they use a lot of the current events and just compare what's going on today?
They do bring it
Okay.
into contemporary, yes.
Yeah, that last line was kind of glaring as of today.
With the student-led inquiry, are you finding though that it's able to finding a medium in terms of staying on course? In terms of,
That's the art of the teaching, and
Okay.
how we're guiding our professional learning is around guiding that inquiry.
yeah, and the resources you feel are there to kind of smooth the path?
We have started a partnership with the consultant from the State Department of Education, the consultant for social studies. There's one. And we started that at Middlebrook over the last 2 years. And he's been bringing a team from different places in the state as it pertains to each individual unit that we're working on and tweaking on. And he's been working with our teachers on inquiry-led practices.
I guess the question is, the textbook providers are where we get our source material.
We're actually relying more on own voice texts so that we can get minority representation from the source rather than an interpretation of a previously marginalized voice. So they're more primary source documents. It's more trade book driven, not fiction, obviously, informational trade books.
Okay.
And you feel that placement of the study of the Holocaust in grade 7 makes the most sense, or?
That was one of the most exciting revisions this summer, is once we got through that year, watching the learning from the Anti-Defamation League and from Facing History that those teachers engaged in, watching that now permeate their other 4 units, and it really created a lovely continuity across their year.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for putting all this
All right.
together and giving us such a great
Yeah.
picture. Thank you.
If you think of anything, you can email me.
All right, next program is K-5 math.
Welcome.
Hi, good evening.
Again.
Again. You get tired of me yet, Glenn?
No, no.
No, never.
I'm Trudy Denton. I'm the curriculum coordinator for math and science, and
I'm Julie Walsh. I'm the math and science coach over at Middlebrook School.
she's here to help answer questions. I thought we'd start with the K-5 6141, and then we'll move on to the 2 Middlebrook courses. I'm going to just hit the highlights from the 6141, and then obviously as you have questions, we can answer them. The K-5 curriculum revision for mathematics is really born of the curriculum review work that we did 2 years ago. We wanted to focus on developing a curriculum that met the needs of our K-5 students, really to build that necessary foundation for their success in secondary mathematics going forward. And that work really focuses on developing conceptual understanding by building understanding of place value, fact fluency, and then ultimately problem solving. The focus of the math curriculum review is on the major work of each grade, and hopefully the idea again is to enable students to build a foundation across those key concepts. The major work of the grades is described on pages 1 and 2. In the curriculum work that we did, we focused very much on developing vertical alignment from grade to grade. We prioritized the important standards within each grade, and we have been building in additional resources to enhance the curriculum, really all across the grades. Currently, we've historically used Math in Focus as our primary text. We have supplemented and built a range of resources using Math in Practice, Developing Number Concepts K2, and Mindset Mathematics 3.5, and along with other materials. From here, there's a chart that shows the specific units that are placed in each of the grade levels. And we talk about instructional methods. It's based on our fundamental belief that every student is a capable math learner. We deliver instruction through a consistent student-centered framework that focuses on exploration and problem solving, guided practice with formative assessment, and independent practice and small group instruction. The impact data is that our focus is developing coherence and conceptual understanding that enables students over time to develop a deeper understanding of mathematics to enable them to apply their learning in multiple contexts. Sort of dropping down to discussion of professional learning. An important part of the professional learning for the math teachers across all buildings is the instructional coaches who are assigned to each of the buildings, who support teachers both in the implementation of their curriculum and the refinement of their instructional practices. A quick look at the budget. Curriculum development refers to the 4 or 5 year time frame that we're implementing new units. We decided not to try to do this all at once, that it was much better for the teachers and the students to take it a couple of units each year. So what you see here is our projection from the summer going forward. There was a question about work during the school year. There is no curriculum development work during the school year for Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill. The coaches do run unit rollouts during the year with teachers, and they do that in a way where they take a day and they use maybe 4 or 5 subs, and they rotate groups of 5 or 6 teachers in to introduce them to the new curriculum units before they're implemented in the classroom. It's very difficult to go through a new unit in September when it's not being introduced until February. So we try to time the unit rollouts to when the new units are being implemented in the classroom. We are slowly reducing our reliance on the Math in Focus resources. Right now, we're maintaining digital licenses for the teachers. We do still buy some workbooks in the K through 5 grades, but that's not, although the budget impact is beneficial, it's not driven by budget considerations. It's driven by quality of materials considerations. We discovered that we had the capacity to build a self-curated curriculum using the best resources, and that's what we're doing right now. We periodically do some professional development. There are individuals who appear nearby in the surrounding communities who are really good at things like number talks and learning progressions for students in the elementary grades. And we take advantage of those by sending small groups of teachers to those workshops, and those are accounted for in the budget.
Classroom teachers or those coaches who are assigned to those?
Both. Often the coach will go with the teachers and share the learning. And for example, some of the Greg Tang workshops have been very successful. A number of the coaches went last year. Their teachers going this year. The same is true for some of the Graham Fletcher work and so on. The commonality, while different districts in Durgay use different programs for mathematics K-5, they are all aligned with the Math Common Core standards, as are we. And the accountability data doesn't really show a correlation between a particular program and success on the Smarter Balance exams. The last 2 schedules in the back, I had to print mine out in color because I can't tell the years. I hope if you need it in color, it's one of those things. That shows you which curriculum units have been revised in which years and which ones we have left to revise. At this point, we have addressed most of the major priority units, the one exception being place value in 3rd grade, which will be revised this summer and implemented next year. Most of the place value units and the fluency units have already been written and implemented or are about to be implemented. So we have some of the geometry, measurement, and data units that are going to be implemented. The one thing that we were going to incorporate in K2 are fluency review mini units to provide students additional opportunity to practice their math fact fluency and re-engage with And that's it for K-5. Do you want to do questions at the end, or do you want to do questions after each one?
Two questions, each one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trudy, I have a question.
Sure.
For example, looking at the colored copies, if you're in third grade, from what I can see, if it's white, it's not coming out for 2021. So if you're in third grade and if you're in third grade today, and graphs measurement and time, for example, is not coming out to 2021, and then you move into fourth grade, fifth grade, when are you circling back to get that?
You're still seeing that content. That content already exists.
It just hasn't been revised.
It
Okay.
hasn't been revised.
Got it.
The movement away from math and focus, are other schools, systems in the JERG doing that also? Or what, is there another program that is prevalent in the JERG in the schools?
There's a number of programs that other districts use. I would say 3 schools in our DIRG use Math and Focus. One of them has elected to upgrade to the next edition. We have the 2012 version of Math and Focus, so there is a more recent.
Common Core.
No, Common Core actually was released in 2010. The state of Connecticut adopted the Common Core in 2012.
Right, so, well, but,
It was written to be aligned.
okay.
There, like many textbooks, and this is my own personal bias, the business of textbook writing is just that, a business. Textbooks are produced to appeal to a wide range of buyers, including those who are aligned to the Common Core and those who have their own state standards and whatnot. So you're not going to find a perfect product in a textbook. And if we look at textbooks as wonderful resources, which they are, that's how we utilize them. The problem with the Math and Focus edition, which hasn't changed in their subsequent edition because I've looked at it, is that there is often off-grade level content included, usually above grade level content. When we implemented the program, we didn't know the standards as well as we do today, so teachers would often try to introduce students to topics that they were not ready to learn and sort of get bogged down in those topics and not be able to get through what they needed to get through. That's going to exist in any textbook in any program.
Is there an option? I noticed that there's $249 a teacher for the
Yes.
is that negotiable at all?
Trudy does
I
the negotiation.
usually do.
Yeah.
The rep once told me that he couldn't maintain the price from October to June. I said, then I won't buy it.
Okay.
So we did. We maintained the price. So we negotiate. The difference now is with the older version, we shouldn't have a problem with the digital version, but print versions will probably start to become less available as they push their more recent
Yeah.
version. My hope is that we won't be buying even the digital versions in a year or 2. 3 years out is the break-even point. We always have a choice of buying a 1-year license or a 3-year license. So we have 1 more year of 1-year licenses to go, and then we're in exactly the same place as we would have been had we bought a 6-year license 3 years ago.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Some of the information that you were saying used to be taught that was kind of above the level of some of our students. Are you guys, so you're no longer teaching that, correct? Like you guys
No, we're
have changed
teaching
the
it
curriculum?
at the appropriate grade level.
Right. So for students that are maybe needing to be challenged a little bit more, is there a way to incorporate some of that information to some of those children?
We could, but the research shows that the far better way to provide enrichment for students is by going deeper, not by skipping to higher grade level content. There's always a way to go deeper into the content, and that's what we're doing now. There are those students, they're very few and very far between, who are ready to take on. I've encountered one of them in my career, who do need that opportunity. And we're fully prepared to meet the needs of those students when they come along and when that arises. But we're finding that the far better way to support these students is to challenge them to think more deeply. So when we were in school, probably everybody in this room, when we were in school, it really was about being able to do math calculations quickly. It's not enough. And in fact, some of the slower math thinkers are the far more astute mathematicians. Those who think more slowly and deeply are the kids who really have a good handle on mathematics. So what we're trying to do is provide many opportunities to challenge students. So if a student is doing like 3 times 8 is 24, and they come up with a 3-factor multiplication, then I would welcome the opportunity to sit down with that student and probe their thinking. So it's not really changing the grade level content, it's encouraging them to go deeper into the math.
And our teachers feel prepared to support those kids that are maybe wanting to be challenged?
Sure.
Or need the challenge?
I think they are, and that's some of the work that our coaches do with teachers too, is to help teachers tool up and feel comfortable, not only with the small number of kids who might be ready to accelerate, but there's a range of learners in every class, and we have students who struggle as well. So we're supporting teachers to be able to address the needs of that continuum of learners in every class. Okay.
So just one last question. So
Go
do you
ahead.
feel K-5 is pretty much, you've taken hold of grade 5 and it's,
Yes.
obviously we need to go through revisions, but it's not under the same kind of, let's change the course sequence kind of mode that
Oh, no,
Middlebrook's
not at
in.
all.
This
K-
is much more settled.
Yeah, K-5 is 100% Common Core aligned. What we're doing is refining the units to provide for that range of learner in every class, to provide for those deeper opportunities for students to learn mathematics. That's the work that we're doing right now. The time frame that we have planned out for the implementation of all the new units will give us an additional 2 years from the time we complete the rollout to evaluate how it's going prior to the next review cycle in 2023. So that would be the time that we can really sort of take a 10,000-foot view of how things are working. The teachers, the coaches, myself, and the building administrators are always looking at how students are doing on a year-by-year basis. We tweak units as we go along and make improvements.
So, is your feeling then that by doing this and the work that we haven't yet heard in 7th and 8th grade, is that someday we'll be able to beat Darien in our math scores?
It's my life's wish.
Mine too. It's just frustrating that we can't, that we haven't, and they continue to outperform us. I just don't understand. I really don't. But
We're working on that, I promise you.
okay.
I think the best way to do grade 7 math and pre-algebra 7-8 is to do them one at a time, talk about what's contained in each one, and then we can address questions maybe after both. I don't know, it's up to you.
Yeah,
If
that makes sense.
Okay,
Combine the Middlebrook ones in terms of questions.
yeah.
Just for our new board members, I want you to know we did 6th grade last year. So we can
Thank
share
you.
that with you.
So this is 7th grade today, not
No,
7th
next
grade
year.
next year? Got it.
Well, it will be,
This will be 7th
it will be
grade.
7th grade next year.
Got it.
I thought I'd start with a very quick update on where we are with the 6th grade implementation. As Chuck said, this was part of the big shift in the outcome of the math curriculum review were the changes to the course sequence 6-12. Essentially what we found is that our students were not being as successful as they could be in the secondary level. Part of that had to do with the structure of the 6th grade class and the double acceleration into algebra in 7th grade, which required students to master 3 years of foundational mathematics before taking algebra in 7th grade. So this is year 1 of 6th grade math. We are working very hard to incorporate some of the things that we know and loved about Math in Focus, but are increasingly utilizing online open source curriculum called Illustrative Math, which is among the highest rated programs, curricula that one can find, certainly at the middle school level. Julie's been working with the teachers. We are in Unit 2 of the course, and things are going well. The teachers are, I hands down, and I tell Principal Feltz all the time, these teachers are working so incredibly hard. And if you ever see them, please congratulate them. They have been working really hard to make this work. And I think we have a plan. We can certainly come back and do a full-blown update on where the implementation stands at a later date, and focus entirely on that. I will say that there are limitations that result from the instructional time at Middlebrook. We have had to eliminate lessons, and we have to eliminate components in lessons in order to move through the curriculum. That would be true of anything, but it's particularly difficult with the illustrative math curriculum because some of the discovery and the exploration work can't happen in that time frame. But at a later date, we can share more, and I would love to have some of the teachers come and share with you their experiences. The grade 7 math program is just that, a 7th grade Common Core aligned course. Very similar to the course that we have always taught in 7th grade. And again, it's Common Core aligned. What's different now is that we are incorporating elements of the illustrative math curriculum with the Math in Focus program, with the focus on building that foundation that's necessary for primarily algebra and beyond at the high school level. I've included the essential questions that exist within the 7th grade curriculum. You'll notice that there is a similar lesson framework at the secondary level that begins with an inquiry, anchor task, discourse questioning, individual practice, and small group instruction. To the extent we are able to, we incorporate reflection, communication, and incorporate a variety of performance-based learning opportunities and assessments. From earlier grades, we know that the foundation for secondary math is built on place value, number sense, and fact fluency. At the middle school level, we follow with the developing understanding of ratios and proportions, and the equations and expression work that leads into algebra. Again, the focus is on a deep conceptual understanding of mathematics. There's no impact on the elementary level, but on the secondary level, this is the next step in the sequence of course changes that we proposed, and the goal is to provide that strong foundation for students to be successful at the high school and beyond. It will also impact students' preparation for those who take algebra and later courses. It's not that we won't really be impacting the schedule. There'll just be one less course to schedule students for in 7th grade. Currently, 7th grade has an Algebra 1 course, a pre-algebra course, and a grade level math course. So there'll be one less math course at 7th grade. The budgetary constraints, again, are indicated. We are not developing curriculum during the school year, but there is the need for professional learning around the implementation of the curriculum, and I liken it to the staff developer work that takes place with the Teachers College Readers Writing Workshop units at K-5. Okay. There's some professional development incorporated into the budget, which we have a 2-day workshop scheduled for the spring for the 7th grade teachers, and then there's opportunities to do more professional development, specifically as it relates to illustrative math. What we're finding is that CES, our local RESC, has been offering a lot of workshops in illustrative math. There's a number of school districts that are looking to implement
illustrative math. I've heard that Darien is looking at illustrative math, just saying. Sorry.
There first.
Yeah.
Yes, can we do it better?
Exactly. Again, the move away from the digital materials and the Math in Focus print materials is not driven by budgetary consideration, but quality considerations. The illustrative math materials are absolutely superior, and the embedded pedagogy is really without match. Let's talk a little bit about the comparable data. It does transcend and go into the pre-algebra 7, 8, but especially for the new board members who weren't here last year when we went through the presentations around the sequence changes, we always look at what our peer districts in Durgay are doing, and while no other districts have changed what they currently do, there are districts who don't offer geometry in middle school. No one has yet changed, and I'm happy to report I've had inquiries from several districts to find out how we went about going about this change. So I do know that people are looking at it. I think it's important to take into account a little bit of the history of how did we get to where we are? How did these school districts come to offer algebra in 7th grade and geometry in 8th grade? And you have to go back a number of years. Most of these districts established the double acceleration pathway. Call it double acceleration because historically algebra was always offered in high school. So if you accelerate once, that's algebra in 8th grade. Twice would be algebra in 7th grade. Those moves generally preceded the adoption of the Common Core standards. I was in Westport when that happened, and they made the move to geometry in middle school in 2005, 2006. So that's well before the adoption and implementation of the Common Core. When the Common Core was implemented, the level of rigor, especially at middle school, was substantially higher than what it had been prior. 6th grade, there is a huge lift with respect to ratio and proportional reasoning and the introduction of working with equations and expressions. 7th grade is a consolidation year, and then 8th grade, 2/3 of what is currently in a grade level, 8th grade level class is what we would have had seen for the first time in Algebra 1. So there's a substantial rigor lift, which didn't exist. So school districts sort of explored double acceleration to provide rigor to students who are ready for it. Then Common Core came along, and that rigor was built into the grade level courses. What we are also finding is that students who were double accelerating were not getting the benefit of the foundational work in 6th grade. As I mentioned before, taking Algebra 1 in 7th grade effectively means that students in 6th grade had to master 3 levels of middle school mathematics before entering 7th grade. As a result, 35 to 40% of our students who started out in that pathway did not remain in it. So we felt that that meant there was the foundation was inadequate to enable them to proceed. The other important comparison is what's happening outside Durgay. I know we like to think the world revolves around Durgay, and maybe it doesn't, but our neighbors in Westchester and our neighbors in Massachusetts, particularly Massachusetts, which is arguably the strongest state in the United States, at least in terms of the PISA test results, has not offered geometry in 8th grade, has not historically and does not now. And if you look at the communities that surround Boston, the suburban areas, they generally do not offer geometry in middle school. The same is true for most New York State schools and Westchester County. Rye has eliminated any acceleration and offers only one level of math through middle school. More broadly across the country, there is a distinct move away from acceleration for all the reasons that I mentioned. Large school systems, San Francisco Unified School Districts, and for that matter, the entire state of California is moving away from algebra in middle school period, which is even more extreme.
than the move we're making. The move we're making, we're confident in because the Common Core does provide for a compressed 7-8 pre-algebra course. So we feel confident that it's the right fit for our district and our students. But that's sort of the short story behind why we made the shifts that we made. And that is it for grade 7. Should I go into pre-algebra 7-8?
So grade 7 will just lead into grade 8 then?
Yes.
Okay, and that needs to get revised? a
That
little
will
bit?
be, you will hear that this
Okay.
time
Yeah, no, I'm not
next year.
No, I'm not trying to jump on you, all right.
And just wait, and then we have the high school courses to contend with, so.
All right, thank you.
So pre-algebra would be the more challenging accelerated course. It's named pre-algebra 7-8. Jump in if I'm missing anything.
No, so far so good.
It's named that way because it is effectively 2 years of math in one. That's how it's structured, it's compressed. And that is reserved for those students who are ready to entertain that kind of challenge.
Quick,
Go ahead.
do the students test into that?
We'll get to that. We can talk about it now. We have developed a 4 data point placement criteria that we hope to use. That's something that we will share with you. We've kind of mapped it out. We're pretty confident it's going to work. And we're hoping in January, I think the first time we'll have a chance to air it, we have a brown bag lunch with Middlebrook parents, and we're hoping to be able to share it with them or soon after that, and obviously with the board as well. The 4 data points. Go
Okay.
ahead.
And we'll eliminate the override issue by doing that?
Yes, as much as possible.
Okay.
So,
I think we have to,
Yeah.
can I share with how I worded it?
yes.
Placement decisions are the purview of the placement committee. The parents can ask for a review
Right.
of that placement decision, and the final decision will be made by the
By the placement.
building principal in consultation with the math coordinator.
Okay, good.
Okay?
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So
See-
there is no override.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
And the other piece of this, as you know, which we worked very hard to structure, in order to provide, one of the major reasons for overrides was the belief that once a student was placed in a course, that was where they were stuck from that moment until they graduated from high school. The rationale behind what we did was to provide multiple opportunities along the way. So there are other opportunities for students to, when they're ready, to move into a more challenging course trajectory. So once they don't have to make their final decision in 6th grade. So we're hoping at the same time to remove the incentives that unfortunately existed.
Okay, good.
Trudy, I have a quick question.
Sure.
As a mom of a 5th grader and a 7th grader, I'm living this right now.
Mhm.
Did we ever think about the possibility, I feel like we've done this 4 data point placement criteria at the same time that we're changing up the math.
Mhm.
Was there ever thought, maybe, it seems to me a lot of the issues with the math were these overrides.
Mhm.
Did we ever think maybe just leave math as it is and institute this 4 data placement criteria? It just seems to me like by instituting the criteria and changing the math at the same time,
Mhm.
we can't really tell which is benefiting the other. Does that make sense?
No, I hear you, and I understand what you're saying. And limiting enrollment in accelerated courses by virtue of restricting overrides is something that some school districts do. That would not address the absence of foundation in that 6th grade to 7th grade trajectory. In other words, you can't, I don't know of many 11-year-olds who can master 3 years of math content. So the placement criteria would not address that deficit. So we did talk about a lot of things. I don't know that we framed it in exactly that way, but we preferenced making sure that students had an adequate foundation.
Well, I think that's the key. What we did in 6th grade is critical.
Absolutely.
Critical, had to be done. And I think that's really, that will address and hopefully help, a lot of the issues that we're facing. It was
Sheree, can I ask you one more quick question? You
sure.
had mentioned the brown bag lunch at Middlebrook, which is a great idea. Are you guys going to offer another opportunity for parents who can't attend that in the middle of the day?
I think I foresee this working maybe not as broadly, but much the same way we rolled out the information about the course sequence change, where we did 4 community meetings and we did meetings within the school. So I see a structure along those lines. So there will certainly be multiple opportunities, especially for those 6th grade parents, to hear about what the changes are and how we're going to proceed.
Can I speak to that for a moment? I think that one of the advantages of starting with the brown bag lunch is it is an informal forum where really parents get to be the primary speakers, and often those questions can really help us tailor the presentation or the information rollout that comes after that. And so I think that it will help inform the next steps in terms of parent communication.
Which I agree with you. I think that's great. I think there's just a lot of parents who can't attend,
Of course.
in the middle of
How
the
many
day.
parents
That
do
would
you
be
No, so there would need to be day and
Certainly
evening,
there would
which
be
is
daytime and
yeah.
evening
Yeah.
sessions, as well as written communication or narrated PowerPoints.
Okay. Much of the descriptors and the verbiage is the same between the 2 courses. There's slightly more beefed up essential questions for the 7-8 pre-algebra. And apart from that, the goals and the structure of the course mirrors that of the grade 7 math with just different content. And I don't want to frighten anyone. The budget numbers are replicated in the 2 documents. They actually include the projections for course development for both courses. It's not we develop one course and not the other. It's kind of considered together. So it's not double the numbers. Those are the budget projections for both courses. We took that, and that's it.
17 is inclusive.
17 is the whole thing, right?
Can we ask questions? Can I ask you a question? And you guys might not know the answer to this yet, but when I was reading through this, I was talking to impact on scheduling in terms of this, I guess it was the Math 7. I know that you guys have talked about Middlebrook and increasing the instructional time. Have you guys thought about where that extra time might come from?
Yeah, so what I would say is a couple of things. Number one, working with the staff back in the springtime, Lauren and company started to examine different schedules. Several weeks ago, she and a small team went out to a New England League of Middle Schools they call it a scheduling rodeo or a scheduling symposium, and they encountered a schedule model that they think actually could increase time. So they just earlier this week had a first conversation with the instructional leaders, a follow-up conversation on Wednesday with the staff members. I think Lauren's plan I totally support. We need to spend some time with the faculty first and look at that model, look at some other models, get some feedback. I think we were going to bring in a couple of consultants or one consultant who propose this model to them, and then move forward with some information sharing as we move through the rest of this winter, parents, and then obviously the board. But the answer very solidly is yes. And, people need to know there's give and take, right? So we're not adding time to the school day, at least not in this iteration of the proposal. So there's a lot of conversation yet to be had.
What was the initial faculty feedback?
I defer to Lauren on that.
I think we're processing the fact that change is going to come, and we're at the stage where we understand that if time is going to go to math, that time has to come from something. And I think we're asking the question about programmatically, where can we still meet our deliverables and not do harm to the programs that we value. And I think that we have a couple of models that are on the table that we're talking about right now. There's a lot of emotion tied to that, and as is appropriate, that people have very strong feelings. So we're at a stage right now where we're kind of inviting all staff members to think about models they'd like to see built out. We'd like to make sure we look under every stone and make sure we consider all of the viable options before we go forward. We do definitely have a couple that we know on some level would work, but we certainly don't want to rush we last spring really spent quite a bit of time, and we had some doctoral candidates who used our schedule as a research vehicle as well. So we really have looked in some level at hundreds of schedules from across the country. We've looked in greater depth at some of our most comparable districts. But frankly, we're just really getting to the point of, okay, here's the tough conversation, where's the time going to come from? But I think that we are on the brink of having some really robust conversation about that, and I think that we will have, we're definitely having some forward momentum. I don't think, we have not made a decision, there isn't a foregone conclusion at this point about where the time's going to come from.
Thanks.
In due time. You got here at the right time.
More to come. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much
Thanks,
again
Sheree.
for all this work.
You have your work cut out for you.
Thank you.
They're doing it very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. A lot of thought going into it. There's no doubt about it.
Please, I'll move a little more quickly here.
Okay, all right.
Far
we have-
less dense.
We have
and,
several policies. Kevin, do you want to help us with those?
So I'm just going to move you through them as efficiently as possible. So the first policy, 0521, is a revised policy. It's a statement of non-discrimination. We have in several of our series these statements of non-discrimination. You can see here we have struck the old language and we are replacing it with new language that is aligned to the various laws that support and promote non-discrimination. So that's that policy in a nutshell. Good to go? Good to go. All right, moving along. So the second policy is policy 1210. This is a new policy. And so the spirit of this policy really is to encourage the creation and support of parent organizations and to promote relationship between the district and parent organizations. The genesis of this policy, and probably at our next meeting or the meeting after that, you'll see a second companion policy, was an exploration we began this summer of our booster clubs. There were some headlines in the paper about one of our booster clubs, and some of the board members raised questions about our relationship. And when I went into our policy manual, we didn't have any policies that spoke to those relationships, so we're trying to codify that. It made sense to me to start with a parent organization policy and then a companion booster club policy, since a booster club is, generally speaking, kind of a subset of a parent organization. That second policy, you'll see, will be a bit more prescriptive in terms of accepting donations, things like that. Great. So 3543.
34.
Excuse me, 34, what did I call it?
34.
34.
It's okay.
It's transposed, 3453. Okay, great. So this is also, I believe this is a new policy or revised policy. I have my notes here. I'll have to double check. I'm not, okay, so excuse me, it's a revised policy. So we relocated it from, formerly it was called Management of Activity Funds, and it was in the 6000 series, which is the instruction series. It made more sense to locate this policy in the 3000 series, which is Business and Operations. So we did two things. We sharpened up the language and we relocated it to the 3000 series. This is an important policy because student activity funds is one of those areas where, because there's a lot of in and out cash in systems that really need to be paid close attention to because of the possibility of fraud. There's just so many hands and so many activities going on. And so through the policy, we're just clarifying what the accounts are for, who are the custodian of the accounts, and then how they're managed. From a practice standpoint, we are also centralizing oversight of those policies here in the business office and central office. That was not a practice that the district had maintained prior to now. In the past, student activities were maintained at the building level.
Can I ask, since it is going to change in terms of central office, do we have staff?
You know,
Enough staff?
Because all of the reporting is electronic now. You know, that was the other, I think, significant process change we've undergone over the last several years is to move things away from manual processes to automation. So these, I believe, will be also accounted for in our New World software. So we'll be able to just pull reports centrally. So
Okay,
we
got
do
it.
have the staff to do that. In fact, just from a process perspective, at a point in the not too distant future, the Business Operations Committee will begin to receive, as they'll receive quarterly or monthly budget reports, they'll also receive student activity reports.
Right.
Student
Glenn, you
activity
love this, right?
Yep.
You've been
No,
asking for it.
absolutely. I've been asking for it for a long
Yes.
time. It's been an issue. It's been an issue for a while. Yeah.
Great. So 1322, contest for students. This policy is a revised policy. What you see here is just, we have struck the old language and replaced it with language that the policy committee thinks is just clearer. So the purpose of this policy is really just to permit schools to engage in contests for students. And we do all kinds of things, poetry contests, art contests, you name it. This policy approves that. Okay.
Thank you.
Discuss and approve.
We have one more, 14, the budget.
Oh,
Assumptions?
sorry, budget assumptions, thank
Yeah.
you. Great, so we reviewed this at the last board meeting for the benefit of our new board members. This is a document that guides our budget development process. It's really kind of the first step. Go ahead.
Do we get that document?
You should have it.
No.
You should have it. You should all have it.
It's because it was an action item at the last page of
Oh.
the packet.
Oh, very last.
Sorry, yeah, very, very last. All right, thank you.
Got it, I think. Yes.
Very, very last.
Great, so the document itself is fairly straightforward. We lay out some goals and some assumptions.
I've got it.
The goals aren't dramatically different year over year. So, our first goal is to provide adequate funding to maintain and improve the high-quality education provided pre-K-12. Our funding priorities that you'll see coming through the budget development process this year are, number one, to incorporate funding for the Genesis Alternative School Program, and number two, adequately fund the Middlebrook Capital Improvement Plan. So just 2 seconds of history. We had originally included about $460,000 in last year's budget. The Board of Finance reduced our budget. We went back to the Board of Finance for a supplemental appropriation through the charter. They approved that. So while it exists in our budget, it's also offset by that additional revenue. So now we're building the entire cost into the operating budget. Secondly, if you have been in Cider Mill at all this year and you were there last year, it goes without saying that the building is dramatically improved cosmetically. We replaced all of the carpeting in the hallways and classrooms with tile. We replaced all of the lighting with LED lighting and replaced all the ceiling tiles and painted the entire place. So it's a much improved facility. The bones are good. We are aiming to repeat that over probably at least 2 years at Middlebrook School, and then move on to the high school and accomplish some similar facility upgrades that way. They're not cheap, and so you'll see when we get to the the operating capital portion of the budget, a fairly dramatic increase year over year. So beyond that, you'll also note, as we build the budget, we target investments. It's not always obvious in an $82 million budget. The vast majority of our dollars are tied up in our staffing, and so you'll see that expressed in the budget. And then when you look at kind of broad categories, we invest substantially in professional learning. We invest substantially in digital resources and digital learning because those are the movements we're making to drive instructional improvement and innovation. You'll also see targeted spending proposals for the Library Learning Commons. Beyond that, in terms of budget goals, we adhere to our class size guidelines. We'll continue beyond Middlebrook to fund the capital improvement plan. There are small projects occurring throughout the district. And then year 4, the digital learning plan. And you'll hear a lot more about that from Frank Kampar and Eric Hawkinson. In terms of assumptions, we always scrutinize our budget and look for opportunities for efficiencies. We comply with federal and state mandates. We honor our collective bargaining agreements. Within those, we are projecting various salary increases. So teachers, we're projecting that contract will increase by 2.92%, the administrators by 2.5%, the custodial contract by 2%, and then secretaries and paraprofessionals by 2.3%. We expect, as we do annually, to see some of those total salary increases offset by attrition. So, oftentimes we'll have a half a dozen or so of our most highly paid staff members retire, and we replace them with oftentimes lower paid staff members because they come in earlier because of their years of experience, so they're lower on the salary scale. Chris Burney is our facilities director, and he manages the facilities for the town. He and I had a conversation a number of weeks ago, and he was very encouraged by the savings we've picked up through the solar arrays, both on the buildings and through the net zero metering program that the town is engaged in. And so he was initially forecasting that we may see no utility, overall no cost increase, so that number may be flat. As we move into the process, I'll get hard numbers and report back to the board on what we're actually projecting dollar for dollar. Our liability insurance, we are projecting will increase by about 5%. The medical insurance costs, we've had very, very good claims history for the last several years, and so we're anticipating our claims the cost of the plan will increase somewhere between 4% and 6%. Brown & Brown is our insurance broker, and so they negotiate with Anthem, our insurance provider, on our behalf.
Kevin, it's increase, right? It doesn't say that it says medical insurance costs will blank 4 to 6%.
So
but that's
increase.
Okay. So you said increase, right?
Yes, correct. That's an important word that I deleted.
Of course.
I would prefer decrease, but transportation costs, that's really contract driven, about 4%. And then, as you heard earlier, we're anticipating a fairly modest student enrollment decline, plus or minus 54 students. And then OPEB, those are the other post-employed employment benefits for our non-union folks, and we're anticipating an increase there of about 5.89%.
Questions?
What's an
Comments?
example of a non-union?
A discretionary employee, me.
Got it.
We have some other staff, so our maintenance staff, custodial staff are considered discretionary, who are not in the TRB. I should have been a little more artful in my response to you. So people like me who operate under certification participate in the teacher's retirement system. So this refers to people who are not in the unions or in the teacher retirement system.
Teachers.
Got it.
One comment I had for budget goals, we've seen several, and it seems like more than normal, 6141s, and I wonder if we could bake something under budget goals just that we protect that investment. It may end up being slightly more than usual or just usual, I don't know, but there's some exciting things coming down the road, and it'd be nice to sort of plant the flag there a little bit.
In new courses and programs?
Yeah, or updated programs.
Great.
Any other comments, questions? All right, so the next time, we do need to approve these at our next meeting. All right, thank you for moving that. All right.
They come back revised, right?
So I'll make the ad, if people are comfortable with
Yeah,
Debbie's
and if
recommendation,
there's-
I'll make the
yeah,
ad.
Right, and any other suggestions,
Yep, send my
email
way.
them
Okay.
to Kevin. Okay, now we are in action items. Zero waste guide.
So Tammy has been so
Tammy, I am
patient this
so
evening.
sorry that you waited.
Sorry, Heather had to go. She couldn't need someone with the kids.
So Tammy, welcome. I'm just going to give a preface and then ask you to weigh in. So I think, for my part, one of the areas of work in this district that I am exceptionally proud of, and it's work led by Tammy and Heather Priest, is the effort around zero waste and really greening our schools and our community. And so our students in all 4 of our buildings participate in zero waste and lunch. My own kids came home this week and we're very excited about sorting and separating. So I have to go buy new bins at my house. That's okay.
We need to have that.
That's right. It's got to be consistent at home and at school, right? Thank you for that. So as part of their work, Tammy and Heather developed a zero waste guide, a set of guidelines that really drive both our expectations as well as roles and responsibilities, and lay out the blueprint for what it is we're trying to do and how we want to do that. They had come to the board back, I think, our first board meeting in August and presented this. And what we're asking tonight, you've had a chance to review, I'd like the board to make a motion to adopt this set of guidelines for us.
Okay. Do you have anything that you need us to highlight or?
No, I think, and we can't take credit for all of it because West Hartford did put something much larger together, and so we were able to use what they had done and adopt it to more of what was happening with us and where we were in our stage of the program. So we're just looking for it to become really part of who we are as a district, and by adopting the guide and the policy to know that it's there and it's something that anyone in those roles can kind of go back to and kind of see what their responsibility might be or where their participation would lie. It could fluctuate, it could change.
Sure.
There's, definitely things that we're always tweaking along the way, but I think it's a great overarching guide to follow.
Okay, great.
I move that we adopt the program guide as we see it today, knowing that it will continue to change and evolve and develop as other things happen. It's an incredible amount of work that you guys have taken on your own to bring this together and bring this to us. I'm just, just second what Kevin says, it's exciting. It's thrilling to be really on the forefront, I think.
Yes, and it has been really wonderful to help guide other school districts down this road as well.
We're kind of leading the charge here and have been, so I think it's just great. So I recommend that we adopt and approve.
I second.
Okay. Further discussion, comments?
I just have to say thank you. I know, and this is going to result in some cost savings over time with the totes, and I've been talking to Heather about this, so I know you guys, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, can I have a comment about that? Because thank you for raising that. Tammy and Heather were very persistent in pursuing us to examine our carding contract, which had been in place for many years, and we hadn't examined it. And as a result of our behavior changes, it really didn't match what we needed. So consequently, we went back to city carding. We had some analysis done, and they changed the structure of what we're carding, and it actually I think will yield somewhere about $1,700 a month or so in savings that we're already starting to realize because we've made those changes just within the last 6 or 8 weeks.
And I
Really
think
terrific.
that's like a first step with them, and I
Yes.
think we're going to assess it and see, and it might still need some tweaking, dumpster sizes and locations and things like that. But this is the first step we've been waiting for. So.
It's great to have a volunteer that goes and measures dumpsters.
Lots of pictures on my phone of dumpsters.
Talk about getting your hands dirty.
It's incredible work you're doing.
All right, well, let's take a vote now. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Unanimously and enthusiastically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Manish, you call Heather and let her know, okay?
Yeah. Okay, approval of policy 1360, student awards and scholarships. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wait, I lost it, I gotta keep remembering to turn the page. Policy 0200, educational goals, which was the update to what we've been working on in terms of mission goals.
That's right.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. New policy 5141.214, sunscreen application. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, okay. Those are the policies. Last meeting, we discussed in more detail, but I think you had, hopefully new members had a chance to take a peek. But hopefully we're in the position of being able to discuss and improve the special education scorecard targets. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. However,
However.
hey, can we, I can't read it.
I can't read it either.
I mean, how can we have someone work up, something, a 2-page, make it a 2-page document or something? Because can we be on 2 pages? You don't have to squeeze it all in one. Maybe? Okay.
Second that.
All right.
But don't get in the way of the motions.
Yeah, that being said, I will continue my motion to approve. Okay?
Was there a second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we moved the budget assumption and goals. We have a next meeting date, and it is time for final comments from the public. All right, having been through the entire meeting agenda and not hearing any need to add anything else, the meeting is adjourned.